Everything about Mixtape just keeps coming to the same conclusion, which is that this whole thing stinks, like really bad, man. And people are also starting to look into what exactly led to this thing's creation in the first place. And well, let's just get into that one, shall we? So in case you don't know, Mixtape was made by the Australian dev studio Beethoven and Dinosaurs. Everyone who has criticized this game has wondered, well, how did this sort of thing even get made in the first place? Who funded it? Well, now we actually know. Mixtape was created through Business Victoria, as seen here on that group's website. So Business Victoria is a branch of the Australian government that uses its budget to create and cultivate media created by Australian artists. This isn't necessarily bad, of course, since games like Cult of the Lamb, for example, were also to some degree funded by the Australian government as well. Government funding is nothing new really, however, in Australia's case especially, they tend to only fund things that, align politically with what they believe that should exist in the here and now. If there's any doubt that Mixtape was not funded by the Australian government, here is the exact excerpt from Business Victoria's own government page, as you can see there, detailing that, Mixtape was indeed created through the use of Australian taxpayer dollars. As they say there in bold, Vic Screen's funds were integral to the creation of Mixtape, meaning this is a game that could only exist because it was created through both government funding and a publisher in Annapurna, which has very deep pockets. Either way, this is why Mixtape now exists, because it's not necessarily organic in how it was even made. It was created to push the idea that indie games are still indie, even if huge mega groups with deep pockets are involved with every step of the way, which kind of goes against the whole indie thing. But this does mean that Mixtape, just like games such as Dustborn and more, are all being suspiciously created and artificially pushed by their respective governments by using taxpayer dollars, which is really weird. This is also why you have websites running such defense for games like a Mixtape, because they want to normalize the idea of games that are first of all not really video games, but also Mixtape's reception with the glowing scores and whatnot. That proves another problem that I think really does need to be discussed, which is that this game's legitimacy and reach only exists because of one simple reason: the will of the game's media. You see, the game's media for a very long time now has hated the idea of YouTubers or really anybody who is not owned by some corporation. It's much easier to silence a games journalist employee because they work at some website, and likely due to the fact that IGN, for example, tends to own a vast majority of these sorts of websites. They all tend to say the same things and champion the same ideas. That is not by mistake. It's why everything feels homogenous, because it's by design. Nothing is really organic. But why I say this is because you see, before the rise of independent content creators, the life and death of many games were not dictated by, well, you or me. They were instead allowed to exist and survive based on the recommendations and push of games media. You can circle this back to IGN, even X-Play as a TV show, or even further back, like Canadian programs like Electric Playground, which I used to watch all the time as a kid. The point was that the existence of Mixtape is not only astroturfed, but also manufactured, as if this game was made in a lab somewhere, like some weird chimera monster that fitted all the modern sensibilities of today's struggling games journalism sphere in one game. Its legitimacy, the high scores, the public exposure, it was all by design and pushed by the very games media telling you all to just stop criticizing it. Mixtape, in a way, is like a social experiment to see if games media still has the power to artificially boost something out of obscurity into the mainstream based on their recommendations and coverage alone. If they, as in the games media, can legitimize Mixtape as a product, or even as a phenomenon that they can then in theory replicate this success and process again and again as many times as needed. And then if you point this out, that this all feels fake and fabricated, not to mention that the Australian government funding, well, you're part of the problem now, aren't you? As the gamer said there with their own article, Mixtape is coming under fire for not having gameplay, which just isn't true. They then prove my point in the very first sentence, which reads, after getting rave reviews from critics, Mixtape is now coming under fire from some players over claims that it basically plays itself, which just isn't the case at all. Rave reviews from the critics. Oh yes, the oh so not fabricated at all legalization tactic these types believe means that a game cannot receive criticism now, because it has been deemed untouchable by the game's media. Gee, wonder where I've heard that such talk like this before, hey? The gamer then brings up a clip of Mixtape from a user on Twitter as seen here as proof that the game does not play itself because there are moments where Rockford, that's the main character, has to, and no I'm not kidding, walk forward very slowly by you just holding holding forward on your analog stick. Wow, such gameplay. Definitely worth a 10 out of 10 now, isn't it? These people are so hard pressed because their recommendations and opinions are not being accepted with open arms the way that they used to. Why are people hating on MIXTAPE? We specifically told you that it was a good game, which magically means that we're not allowed to criticize it because some reviewer gave it a 9 out of 10. That's not how it works anymore. We don't live in the era of X-Play or Game Informer's reviews mattering more than the common players does. Now anybody can say their opinion, but that's what angers these people the most, because they don't want us to be able to do that. They're mad that their influence has effectively been so diluted and damaged that they've become walking jokes at best. Funnily enough, the gamer ends up ruining their own stance, where they say here that there are scenes in the game where you barely need to play the game. It's also pathetic, because they don't even refer to these parts of the game as gameplay sequences. Notice the words used. They said scenes. They even subconsciously know that what they're playing is nothing but a movie with barely any interaction at all. And they don't even realize that they're owning their own argument by doing this of their own free will. You know you're not making a game for actual people who play video games when somebody like Dean Takahashi, of all people, ends up praising your game, as you can see here. You see, you may read that name and go, wait a minute, who's Dean Takahashi? You remember that infamous Cuphead story about the game's journalist who couldn't even complete the tutorial of Cuphead because he kept getting stuck and couldn't proceed? Yeah, that's Dean Takahashi, the same guy. Dean, as seen here, gave MIXTAPE a 4.99 out of 5, which is just ridiculous. He deducted a 0.1 point because of the graphics, apparently. Again, if you ever needed more examples of why people don't take gaming journalism seriously, there you go. He even says in that same paragraph there that MIXTAPE is a triumph because it's an indie game not made with millions of dollars. Oh, Dean, I know you're never going to live down the Cuphead tutorial a moment, but can you at least try these days to sound genuine? So you're telling me that MIXTAPE, the game where it has over 20 licensed songs that weren't cheap to get the rights to, by the way, is somehow not a, I don't know, millions of dollars like game budget-wise too? Are we being serious? The same game that is backed by Annapurna with their deep pockets, and again, this was all funded by Australian taxpayer money too, which I guarantee you, probably not many people in Australia even knew that they were paying for things like this in the first place. Dean unironically ends his article by saying this about MIXTAPE. Others will criticize it for being a walking simulator, but that didn't bother me at all because I was really there for the continuous story. I'm sure it didn't, Dean, because we all know what happens when you actually have to play a video game yourself and not be led by the developers like a dog on a leash. Again, this is the guy who couldn't beat the Cuphead tutorial. That is real. He's also the same guy who had to apologize about his Mass Effect review almost 20 years ago now, because Dean Takahashi, as seen here from Engadget in 2008, dude. As you can see, he gave BioWare's Mass Effect a scathingly bad review because he rushed through the game's early moments. He didn't beat the game himself, and then he scored the game poorly, and he complained that Mass Effect's combat was too hard because, and no, I'm not even kidding, Dean Takahashi didn't realize that you could open a menu in Mass Effect to level up your squad members. Even though the game does tell you how to do this very, very early on in the game. I would know. I've played Mass Effect over 10 times, okay? I know all the lore of that world. I love those games. I would know this. So Dean was not paying attention to any of this. And again, he scored Mass Effect poorly because he doesn't know how to read menus or play games properly at all. Again, 20 years ago. Remind me again why anyone would take what this guy says as real ever again. The guy's worked in games media somehow for almost 30 years. Despite routinely proving he doesn't know what players want, can barely play the things that he has to. And he literally admitted that he reviews games before even beating them. Not 20 years, it was 18, but close enough. Again, why do this, right? No wonder he loves MIXTAPE. It's again because these people artificially boost the sort of games that they want to see more of. It's really no surprise that the Cuphead tutorial guy wants more games
Finger licking good special.
I'm honestly baffled by that. Like, how do you not know to level up your characters in an RPG? What the F? It's so stupid, man. It's so dumb. These are the same sorts of games journalists who hate the upcoming James Bond game, by the way, that's coming out, because as you can see there, James Bond is apparently too suave and cool and they can't relate to him, so this means that magically James Bond is not allowed to have his own video game series, apparently. Like, where does this sort of stupidity and pick-me attitude end? They want games to be just as lame and easy and stupid as they are. Why are these people being handed the keys to the industry engine? Never mind not speaking for players, okay? These people can't even play video games. Seriously, the PC Gamer James Bond article is so laughably bad, man. I know this video is about Mixtape mostly, but it all just gels together into the same gelatinous gray goop in the end anyways. These people do not speak for you or me clearly. Hiring Dean Takahashi to review video games is like hiring somebody who's illiterate to review like full-blown novels. Doesn't make any sense. You don't see me trying to say that we can't have James Bond games because I'm not driving around the European countryside blowing up barrels and shooting up bad guys. But isn't that the whole point of a video game? Escapism and all that, entertainment? Either way, this whole thing just kind of stinks. And it's tiring to see websites defend these sorts of games too, when they also know, like, this is just being done in bad faith. Again, it's not unusual that Mixtape was funded by the Australian government, as these tax incentives, yes, they exist all over the world, I know that. But I think the reason why people are so up in arms is because they're instead asking, well, who exactly are these projects then being made for? I mean, it's not players, clearly. They're not showing up in numbers that matter, on Steam at least, where we can see the player counts, so what is it then? Because in my opinion, once taxpayer-backed funding enters the conversation, expectations also change. People are going to naturally become more critical, right? And more skeptical, especially when the projects that are receiving this support unanimously appear heavily aligned with those same critical circles, like the games media or the prestige industry taste that feel like they're tailor-made to force these behaviors, even like a Dean Takahashi. This is why there's such a disconnect, right? It feels like what's being funded and praised is really nothing close to what people actually want these days, as in players, right? Like you and me who pay money for things. And with the media coverage just being how it is these days, the reaction for parts of gaming media followed a pattern that people have also seen many times before too. Because instead of engaging directly with the criticism that they're represented with, the games media instead feels like they are trying to frame this as toxic backlash, or people who are unwilling to support creativity. Oh, the horror. But it's really just not true, right? It's not that people hate artistic games or they oppose experimentation, but because we as players, we feel criticism is increasingly treated as being illegitimate the moment that it challenges the so-called approved narrative around certain projects, like a Mixtape does. That's why you have this deeper issue. It's a balance of trust. Modern games journalists and the players, they're constantly at odds with one another because there is that disconnect for sure. You cannot deny that. And every time any criticism then gets dismissed instead of being, addressed, yeah, that distrust is going to keep growing because the people that are buying and supporting games, they really don't want lectures. They just want honesty. That's really hard to get these days. Mixtape is also clear representation of another annoying trend, right? The rise of the so-called prestige indie game. Games that are being heavily marketed around, their atmosphere, their artistic identity, and their critical positioning, which isn't inherently bad, so to say. Some games are excellent that also do this, like a Hollow Knight, but then again, Hollow Knight is a real video game. But also, people are noticing something too, which is that critical enthusiasm does not always translate into player enthusiasm. And when that keeps becoming more obvious, like it has time and time again, yeah, people will start asking the difficult questions. Now, let's talk about incentives, because once government grants and cultural institutions and prestige media ecosystems become intertwined like they tend to be these days, you also got a specific type of project naturally that also gets elevated, not necessarily through conspiracy, but through like genuine alignment with whatever these sorts of groups want to be pushing, which is usually stuff that they want to see more of themselves. The sort of games that will look good in a trailer, they'll perform well critically, and they can look nice in some PowerPoint presentation so that people can push for more stuff like it, right? These sorts of games will receive stronger support, while the more mechanically focused games will get less attention because, well, you actually have to play them. And trust me, we're noticing that. You can see that backlash around MIXTAPE. Not just about it too, it's about frustration and how it just keeps building, dude. It's been years of people feeling like they're being talked down to by everybody, that their preferences are always being dismissed, and that criticism is really only acceptable when it's in one direction. That's why things are spiraling out so quickly now, because everybody's starting to notice those patterns, and you know a game is culturally backed by the usual suspects, because then also comes the defense cycle, right? Like it always does too. Articles, like I showed you, that frame the criticism as misunderstandings or hostility, or proof that we don't value art as gamers, but all that does is make the situation worse, doesn't it? All it ends up doing is reinforcing the perception that parts of games media are more interested in protecting the industry narrative than understanding the audience's frustration these days. That cannot be denied. This is why you got what's happening, because the whole conversation these days is split between what the journalists want and what the players want. Doesn't mean the divide is evil or anything, but it's going to make friction, of course, either way. But what you're seeing here is that when industries, or the people that are tasked with being the voices between these groups, stop listening to their audiences, yeah, the friction built there is going to grow into resentment, because MIXTAPE being a good game or not is not really the point here. The real story is the reaction surrounding it, because what we're seeing is yet another example of games media refusing to meet the people who keep their lights on at a halfway point. They might think, well, it's the companies, right, or the corporations that keep our lights on. Oh, okay, but don't you need an audience that trusts you and wants to watch you to justify those same companies to want to keep your lights on in the first place? Instead, all they do is villainize you. All they do is denounce your claims and call you crazy and try to swindle the conversation. Oh, you're just being radicalized, like relax a little bit. No, this is why the disconnect keeps disconnecting the way that it does, doesn't it? Because these institutions, these media ecosystems, and the audience itself are all at odds with one another. And every single time that real criticism is being dismissed, which is like all the time pretty much, like it has been with MIXTAPE, that's for sure, instead of being engaged with it and trying to understand the way that it should be, that disconnect is just going to keep multiplying, man. Not because players hate creativity or that they hate games that use licensed music or whatever. It's because the people who buy games are feeling like honesty is no longer a priority when it comes to what the game's media is championing when they choose to push a game like this. And that is why, since audiences have started believing and understanding this and seeing it more often, that's why the trust is becoming even more difficult to rebuild the way that it has. Like, look at this post from Kinda Funny of all places. Oh, these guys, man, they're all shills in a YouTube short pretty much. But anyway, in this short, they're saying that a MIXTAPE is a 10 out of 10 because of course it is to them, because they have to be positive about everything that they're shown or they're just going to lose access. Hilariously though, their comment section is literally nobody agreeing with Kinda Funny at all. Wow, imagine that happening. Almost like it keeps proving what I'm saying, that the industry shills and the people who actually buy games are on completely different sides of the spectrum or wavelength, however you want to put it, when it comes to almost anything these days. I also can't really show their comment section because it's full of swears and whatnot, and YouTube won't like that, but if you don't believe me, go look it up on their Twitter page yourself. It's just people grilling them like the idiots that they are. It's just, honestly, sad to see places like Kinda Funny still exist the way that they do. It's just a bunch of yes men saying yes to each other because they want their access to their free game still. These people are never going to challenge anything the industry does because they are nothing but talking mouthpieces that are just going to say whatever they're told to say. Why anyone watches Kinda Funny, I have no idea, man. They're effectively mandated state propaganda paid by publishers to just say whatever they're told to say. They even at one point in one of their videos they posted posted in that section, which I can't show because, I mean, come on. They're going to 100% copyright strike me if I do that, but they also said, like, publicly and openly that they think that Dragon Age Veilguard's a great game too. And they had the whole panel, like, with everybody on there. They had a giant 9 on the screen and Dragon Age Veilguard on the side there. It was, good God, it's so cringe, dude. How these guys exist, I have no idea. But I mean, with people like that, and I guess Dean Takahashi, who couldn't even beat Cuphead's tutorial, or even knew that you could level up in Mass Effect, being your arbiters of moral truth these days, well, no wonder things are the way that they are. Like, seriously, dude, I knew a girl that I worked with, so a little story time for you before I end the video. Her kids were playing Kingdom Hearts, like the first one, right? And her kids were like 5 years old or something. And she was telling me at work how, like, her kids couldn't play the game because Sora, like who you play as, obviously was too weak. And then I told her to tell her kids that they can actually level up Sora and equip abilities and change his keyblades and all that stuff to make him stronger, right? So anyway, she comes back eventually and she was like amazed. She's like, oh my God, we didn't know you could do that. But again, like, the kids are 5 years old. This girl's not a gamer. So like, I get that reaction there. But if like a 50-year-old games editor like Dean Takahashi is basically doing unironically what those 5-year-old kids were doing, and he's apparently the guy who reviews games and also affects the livelihoods of game developers when it comes to what he scores games as, like, this is just nonsense, man. Throw Mixtape away. Just throw it all away. Burn this all down and start over. It's like these people are living in the baker's house in like Resident Evil 7 and like the mold has got into their brains. Because at this point, no wonder everything is backwards the way that it is. The entire industry is a mess. And this is who is tasked with keeping us on the right path? These people who are bought and paid for with like the littlest amount possible to say whatever they have to say so they keep their access because they want to be like, you know, brought to the award shows and get the free hotels and whatever. Like, they will say whatever they have to keep that access. That is just truth. Like, no thanks, I'm good. It's horrible, but oh my God, dude, it's awful. But anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know what you guys think. Like always, subscribe if you'd like to. I'll see you guys next time. And I still can't get over the fact, man, didn't even know that Mass Effect had upgrades. Like, how are these people still employed, man? I'm done. See you next time.